Alrighty.
We're going to do Algebra 2 lecture for 10.7 and 10.8. That's OASA 2A14. Again, we're talking about factoring. The student will factor quadratic trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. This is called the standard form, or the general form of a quadratic trinomial. And a is going to be a number, b is going to be some number, and c is going to be some number. And in this, we're going to be factoring a quadratic trinomial of this form in which there is no greatest common factor. Last time we were trying to see, hey, if this is a 2, we would see if everything divides by 2. Well, this time we're going to do that. We're going to try to see if everything will divide by whatever this number is, and we're going to find that it won't. And when that happens, we have to have a technique for factoring it if it's factorable. And that's what I'm going to try to show you today. What happens if you go to factor this thing and there's no greatest common factor, but a is still not a 1? It doesn't look like just plain old x squared. So here we go. Here's how you do it. Here's one way of doing it. I call this the T method. Some people will call it the airplane method. But I look up here and say, hey, okay, we've got a 5. Let's see if we can factor a 5 out of all of these. Well, these two are not divisible evenly by 5, so I can't factor out a 5. So what I'm going to do is see if I can use what I call the T method. And we go like this. We write a T. It involves this kind of thinking. Before I start this problem, I just want to show you what kind of thinking I'm going to be using. If I start with the number 5, I'm just pulled that out of thin air. If I take 5 and I multiply it by some number, say I multiply it by 2, and then I turn around and divide that by 2. So I took 5, I multiplied it by 2, and then I turn around and divide it by 2, I'm right back to 5. If I take any value and I multiply it by something and turn around and divide it by the same thing, I haven't changed the value of this. This still has a value of 5. It looks different. It looks like 10 over 2, which is 5. It looks different, but it still has a value of 5. And that's the kind of thinking I'm going to be doing in using the T method. What we do when we use the T method is we open up 2 sets of parentheses, and we put 5a, in this case, we take this number and put it here, and we put it here. Now look at this. If I were to FOIL this, I go 5a times 5a, I would get 25a squared. And I don't want 25a squared, I just want 5a squared. So I'm introducing an extra factor of 5 for just a second. It's going to be introduced for just a second. Then I'm going to turn around and divide one of these by 5. And so I've multiplied by an extra 5, and here in just a second I'm going to divide by that 5. And so it won't change the value. It'll be just like I did here. If I started with 2 and I multiply it by 5 and then I divide it by 5, I've still got a value of 2. So let's see here. I went 5a, 5a. Doing this enables me to multiply these two together and put that number right here. 5 times 16 is 80. And now I'm looking for factors of 80 that will add or subtract to give me 38. Well, the first one that popped into my head, 80 is even, so I divided it by 2, and that gave me 2 and 40. And 2 and 40 will add up to 38 if one of them is negative. So I'm going to try 2 and 40. Doesn't matter where I put them. What matters is they have to add up to positive 38. They must add up to positive 38. So I'm going to say positive 40 and negative 2. I've got this factored, but if I multiply this, if I FOIL this, I've got 5a times 5a, that's 25a squared. I don't want that. I introduced an extra 5 into one of these, and so what I'm going to do is divide one of these by 5 now. This one, both of these won't divide by 5, so I'm not going to divide this one by 5, but I think both of these will divide by 5. So I'm dividing out that 5 that I just introduced. This one stays the same, 5a minus 2. Dividing both of these by 5 in my head, 5a divided by 5 is a, 40 divided by 5 is 8, and we're done. I was taught to do this by a teacher that liked us to do a lot of work. And so he would make us do trial and error. All the factors of 16 and factors of 5, and you would try them all, and you might try 10, 12 different iterations before you come across one that works. This technique, the T method or the airplane method, some people say it looks like an airplane. I call it the T method. This will always take 2 steps and you're done. Okay? I'm going to do a couple more and show you how it works. And it's going to be the same thing as this, but just a little bit less talking. We'll see. Now look at this one. I say, okay, I'm asked to factor completely. That's what my instructions say, factor. I look up here and I say, okay, that's a 2. The first thing I do is see, will both of these divide by 2? This one will, but this one won't. And they have to both divide by 2 evenly, or I can't factor out a 2. So what I'm going to do, I can't factor out 2 and have that be a whole number, or an integer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the T method. I'm going to introduce an extra factor of 2. Here in just a second, I'm going to have to divide one of these by 2, because 2v times 2v is 4v squared. I don't want that. But I've introduced this so I can multiply these 2 together. 2 times 50 is 100. You can ignore the plus or minus. Don't worry about that just yet. This is just scratch work over here. I want factors of 100 to add up to 15. Well, 2 and 50 won't work. 100 won't divide by 3. 4 and 25 won't work. 5 and 20 will work. 5 times 20 is 100. 5 and 20 will add up to 15 if the 20 is positive and the 5 is negative. So I'm going to put that in there. Doesn't matter where I put the 20 or the 5. What matters is these 2 numbers must add up to 15 positive. So the only way that can happen is if I've got a positive 20 and a negative 5. At this point, unless I've made mistakes, I don't think I have, I'm ready to divide one of these by 2. And I look at this one, that won't divide by 2. They're not both even. But this one will. Both of these will divide by 2, so I'm going to divide it by 2 and get v plus 10. I've divided out that extra 2 I introduced. 2v minus 5. You're only going to divide one of these by that extra 2 that we introduced. So now when I FOIL this, I'll have 2v squared minus 5v plus 20v, there's my 15v, minus 50. If I FOIL this and then combine like terms, I'll get this. Okay? T method, or the airplane method. You'll hear it called both things. So let's take a look at this one. Here's another one. First thing I do is I check to see if I can divide each one of these by 3, and they won't divide evenly, so I'm going to try the T method. I'm going to introduce an extra factor of 3, and then I'm going to divide one of these factors by that extra 3 that I introduced. Here we go. I'm going to say 3p, 3p. That gives me 9p squared, so one of these is going to have to be divided by 3, and I'll figure out which one here in just a second. But doing this enables me to multiply these 2 together, ignore the negatives, any negative. This is just scratch work. I want factors of 30 that add up to 29. Well, 30 times 1 is 30. 30 minus 1 is 29. So I'm going to go with factors of 30 that are 30 and 1. Doesn't matter where I put them. I'll put 1 here and 30 here. I could put 30 here and 1 here. What matters is they add up to negative 29. The only way that can happen is if the 30 is negative and the 1 is positive. Now that I have done this, I've still got an extra 3. 3p times 3p is 9p squared. I don't want that. So one of these has got to be divided by that 3 I introduced. And it's that one. 3p plus 1 won't divide by 3 evenly, but this will. I can divide this by 3 and get p, divide this by 3 and get 10. And I'll go ahead and FOIL this last one to show you that it actually will give me this. 3p times p is 3p squared. This is just the check. 3p times negative 10 is negative 30p. Then I'm going to take that 1 and distribute it. Whoops, get out of there. Taking 1 and distributing it. 1 times p is plus p, or plus 1p. And 1 times negative 10 is negative 10. And when I combine these like terms, I wind up with 3p squared minus 29p. Because these are different signs, so I subtracted. Negative 30p plus 1p, subtracted 29p, keep the sign of the one with the greater absolute value, and just bring that down. Okay, so these will multiply together to give me this, which tells me that I have factored it correctly. That's the T method. Hopefully that makes sense. That's our answer. All that blue stuff down there was just a check to demonstrate that this does actually give you this if you multiply them together using FOIL. Or you can use Punnett square if you want. That's the idea. I hope it makes sense.